My phone buzzed at exactly 3:29 in the morning, jolting me from the deepest sleep I'd had in weeks. The caller ID made my stomach drop. Derek Hoffman, my supervisor at Megaflow Logistics. His voice slurred through the speaker, aggressive and bitter. "Fern, you need to come in immediately for a termination meeting. You're being let go for workplace attitude issues and difficulty with authority." I sat up in my Phoenix apartment bedroom, completely stunned. 3 years of stellar performance reviews, saving 2 major client accounts single-handedly, and this is how it ends. His drunk rambling revealed the truth. Yesterday's board meeting, where I questioned his fraudulent expense reports, had sealed my fate. They weren't just firing me, they were silencing me. I arrived at Megaflow Logistics headquarters in downtown Phoenix at 6:45, 15 minutes before Derek's official firing time. The building's glass facade reflected the early morning sun as I badged into the lobby, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I needed to clean out my office before facing the humiliation Derek had planned for me. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt endless. My mind raced through 3 years of dedicated service, the late nights, redesigning routing systems that saved the company millions, the weekend emergencies I handled without complaint, the innovative cost-cutting measures that earned Megaflow industry recognition. All of it meaningless because I dared to question Derek's ethics. I unlocked my office door and immediately noticed something wrong. My filing cabinets were slightly ajar, and papers on my desk had been shuffled. Someone had been searching through my workspace. My backup drives containing copies of all my work projects were missing from the locked drawer where I always kept them. Voices echoed from the conference room down the hallway. I recognized Derek's gravelly tone and Patricia Wells, our HR director. Curiosity overrode caution as I crept closer, stopping outside the supply closet adjacent to the conference room. The door was cracked open just enough for me to slip inside without being seen. "The fabricated evidence looks convincing," Patricia was saying, her usually professional voice cold and calculated. "We've created fake emails showing Fern downloaded confidential client databases to her personal devices. The timestamps match perfectly with her after-hours access logs." Derek chuckled, the sound making my skin crawl. "Perfect. She was getting too close to discovering the vendor contracts anyway. That little presentation yesterday about expense irregularities almost exposed everything." I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking as I started recording. This was beyond workplace politics. This was criminal conspiracy. "The quarterly audit starts next month," Derek continued. "If anyone discovered those fake vendor payments, we'd both be facing federal charges." Fern had to go before she connected the dots. Patricia shuffled papers. "I've already contacted 6 major logistics companies in Arizona and Nevada. Fern's name is on an informal blacklist for corporate espionage. She won't find work in this industry again." My blood turned to ice. They weren't just firing me, they were destroying my entire career based on lies. "What about her work files?" Patricia asked. "Already deleted from the servers," Derek replied smugly. "I removed her backup drives yesterday after the meeting. Those routing algorithms she developed saved us $2 million annually, but officially I created them. Her personnel file shows no record of those innovations." The recording continued as Derek detailed his embezzlement scheme. For 18 months, he'd been creating fake vendor contracts, billing Megaflow for non-existent services, and pocketing the payments through shell companies. The fraudulent expenses I'd questioned were just the tip of the iceberg. "Fern's too smart for her own good," Derek muttered. "She would have figured out the whole operation eventually. This way we eliminate the threat and I get credit for her work. Win-win." I'd heard enough. Rage boiled in my chest as I slipped out of the supply closet and returned to my office. Everything I'd built at this company, my reputation, my innovations, my career, Derek was stealing it all while framing me as a criminal. I grabbed my personal belongings and the few items Derek's search had missed. The recording on my phone was my only weapon against their lies, but it was enough. As I walked toward the elevator, Derek emerged from the conference room with his characteristic arrogant smirk. "Fern, right on time for our little chat." His eyes were bloodshot and he reeked of alcohol even from 6 feet away. "Save it, Derek." I kept walking, my voice steady despite the fury coursing through my veins. "I know exactly what you're doing and it's going to backfire spectacularly." His smirk faltered for just a moment before returning. "Good luck finding another job in this industry. Word travels fast about problem employees." I turned back to face him one final time. "You're absolutely right about one thing. I am difficult. difficult for liars, cheaters, and criminals who think they can destroy honest people. But you just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic career. The elevator doors closed on Derek's confused expression. As the lobby came into view, I pulled out my phone and called the one person who could help me turn this nightmare into Derek's worst enemy, Janet Morrison, CEO of Velocity Transport Solutions, Megaflow's biggest competitor. The 20-minute drive from downtown Phoenix to Velocity Transport Solutions in Scottsdale gave me time to collect my thoughts and prepare my pitch. Janet Morrison had offered me a position at last year's Southwest Logistics Conference, impressed by my presentation on supply chain optimization. At the time, I'd been loyal to Megaflow and politely declined. Now that loyalty seemed laughably naive. VTS occupied a modern steel and glass complex that radiated success and professionalism, everything Megaflow pretended to be. I walked into the lobby at exactly 8 o'clock, still wearing the business suit I'd put on for my own execution. The receptionist, a friendly woman named Grace, immediately recognized my name. "Ms. Coleman," Ms. Morrison said to send you up the moment you arrived. "She's very excited to speak with you." The elevator to the executive floor was smooth and quiet, unlike Megaflow's aging building where everything creaked and complained. Janet's corner office overlooked the Sonoran Desert, with floor-to-ceiling windows that filled the space with natural light. Janet Morrison stood to greet me, her silver hair perfectly styled and her handshake firm and confident. At 55, she radiated the kind of authentic leadership that Derek could never fake. "Fern, I have to say I'm surprised but delighted by your call this morning. When you mentioned you were interested in discussing opportunities, I cleared my entire schedule." I settled into the leather chair across from her desk, taking a deep breath before diving into the most important conversation of my career. "Janet, I need to be completely honest with you about why I'm here. 2 hours ago, I was terminated from Megaflow Logistics under fabricated charges of corporate espionage. My supervisor, Derek Hoffman, is embezzling company funds through fake vendor contracts and framed me to prevent discovery of his crimes." Janet's expression shifted from surprise to intense focus. "That's a serious accusation, Fern. Do you have evidence to support these claims?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording from the supply closet. Janet listened intently as Derek's voice filled the office detailing his embezzlement scheme and the conspiracy to destroy my career. Her eyes widened when Patricia discussed the industry blacklist and the fabricated evidence. When the recording ended, Janet leaned back in her chair processing what she'd heard. "This is extraordinary, Fern. Derek Hoffman's corruption explains a lot of things that never made sense about Megaflow's recent contract wins." She opened a file cabinet and retrieved a thick folder labeled Megaflow Competitive Analysis. "For the past year, Megaflow has been underbidding us on major contracts by margins that seemed impossible. We couldn't figure out how they maintained profitability while charging 30% less than market rates." Janet spread documents across her desk, showing contract comparisons and financial projections. "Now I understand they've been cutting corners on safety, falsifying inspection records, and violating federal regulations on driver hours. Derek's been winning contracts by breaking the law." She pulled out another set of documents that made my heart race. 3 weeks ago, we received these from a concerned source in the Department of Transportation. Megaflow is under federal investigation for safety violations, regulatory compliance issues, and suspected financial irregularities. The investigation documents detailed systematic violations of trucking regulations, drivers forced to work beyond legal limits, falsified maintenance records, and safety equipment that hadn't been inspected in months. Some trucks were operating with expired certifications and defective brakes. Derek's corruption isn't just about money, Fern. He's been risking lives to win contracts. Those routing algorithms you developed, Derek's been using them to push drivers beyond legal limits because the efficient routes allowed him to pack more deliveries into illegal timeframes. The full scope of Derek's crimes became clear. My innovations designed to improve efficiency and safety had been perverted into tools for exploitation and lawbreaking. Janet closed the folder and looked directly at me. "Fern, I've been trying to find an operations director with your exact qualifications for 8 months. Your reputation in this industry is impeccable. Everyone knows you're the brain behind Megaflow's recent improvements." She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the desert landscape. "I'm prepared to offer you Derek's equivalent position here at VTS. Operations Director, full authority over routing, logistics, and safety compliance. Your starting salary would be 20% higher than what Megaflow was paying you, plus performance bonuses and equity options. The offer was everything I'd hoped for and more, but Janet wasn't finished. More importantly, Fern, this recording and your inside knowledge of Derek's operations could help us save Megaflow's clients from serious legal liability. If those companies knew their shipments were being handled in violation of federal safety laws, they'd terminate their contracts immediately. She returned to her desk and pulled out a business card. There's something else you should know. The federal investigation into Megaflow is being led by Agent Sarah Chen from the DOT's Criminal Investigation Division. She's been looking for someone with inside knowledge of Derek's operations. Janet handed me the card along with a formal offer letter she'd been preparing during our conversation. Agent Chen specifically mentioned that witness testimony from a credible Megaflow employee could accelerate the investigation and prevent further safety violations. I stared at the offer letter, hardly believing what I was reading. Operations Director at Velocity Transport Solutions, salary of $95,000 annually, full benefits, and the chance to work for a company that actually valued integrity. Janet, I accept your offer, but I want you to know that bringing down Derek's operation isn't about revenge. It's about protecting the drivers and clients who don't know they're being put at risk by his criminal negligence. She smiled and extended her hand. Welcome to Velocity Transport Solutions, Fern. Let's go save some lives and destroy some criminals. As we shook hands, I realized that Derek's betrayal had actually freed me from a corrupt company and delivered me to exactly where I belonged. His biggest mistake was underestimating how difficult I could really be when fighting for what's right. My first week at Velocity Transport Solutions moved with the precision and intensity of a military campaign. Janet had given me complete authority over client relations and operational strategy, along with access to VTS's comprehensive intelligence on Megaflow's business practices. Armed with Derek's recorded confession and the federal investigation documents, I began systematically dismantling his empire of lies. Monday morning, I compiled detailed risk assessments for Megaflow's 3 largest clients: Phoenix Medical Supply, Southwest Manufacturing, and Desert Electronics. Each company was unknowingly exposing themselves to massive liability by using Derek's illegal transportation services. Phoenix Medical Supply was my first target. Their CEO, Robert Sterling, had built his company's reputation on reliability and regulatory compliance. I called his office Tuesday morning and arranged an emergency meeting to discuss critical safety concerns affecting your current shipping contracts. Robert's conference room overlooked their massive distribution warehouse, where millions of dollars in medical equipment awaited shipment across the southwestern United States. His operations manager, Linda Hayes, joined our meeting along with their legal counsel, David Park. Mr. Sterling, I'm calling this meeting because your current logistics provider, Megaflow, is operating in violation of federal transportation laws in ways that could expose Phoenix Medical Supply to criminal liability. I played selected portions of Derek's recorded confession, focusing on the safety violations and falsified inspection records. Robert's face grew pale as he heard Derek bragging about pushing drivers beyond legal limits and falsifying maintenance schedules. Your medical shipments are being transported by trucks that haven't had proper safety inspections in months. I explained, showing them the DOT investigation documents. Derek Hoffman has been falsifying compliance records to hide equipment failures and regulatory violations. David Park immediately grasped the legal implications. If federal investigators discover that we knowingly used non-compliant transportation services, Phoenix Medical Supply could face fines, license suspensions, and criminal charges for endangering public safety. Linda pulled up their shipping records on her laptop. We've got $200,000 worth of cardiac monitors and surgical equipment scheduled for delivery this week using Megaflow trucks. If those vehicles aren't properly maintained, we're risking equipment damage and patient safety. Robert's decision was immediate and decisive. Terminate the Megaflow contract effective immediately. Ms. Coleman, can Velocity Transport Solutions handle our shipping needs while maintaining full regulatory compliance? Absolutely, Mr. Sterling. VTS maintains gold standard safety certifications and full transparency in all our compliance documentation. We can transfer your shipping operations seamlessly while ensuring zero risk to your company's reputation or legal standing. The contract transfer was finalized within 24 hours. Phoenix Medical Supply's annual shipping volume represented $1.2 million in revenue that Derek had just lost forever. Wednesday brought my meeting with Southwest Manufacturing's leadership team. Their CEO, Patricia Gomez, had built her company into Arizona's largest industrial parts supplier through meticulous attention to quality control and legal compliance. Ms. Gomez, I'm here because your current shipping provider is operating illegal transportation services that could destroy everything you've built. The evidence presentation was even more devastating this time. Patricia's legal team immediately recognized that Derek's safety violations could trigger federal investigations of every company using Megaflow services. Our industrial components are shipped to construction sites, manufacturing facilities, and government contractors, Patricia explained. If federal auditors discover we used non-compliant transportation, we could lose our government contracts worth $15 million annually. Her operations director, Michael Torres, was already calculating the risk exposure. We can't afford to be associated with criminal transportation violations. Our insurance policies specifically exclude coverage for damages resulting from non-compliant shipping practices. The Southwest Manufacturing contract termination was signed Thursday morning, representing another $800,000 in annual revenue lost to Derek's crumbling empire. Desert Electronics proved to be the most satisfying conquest. CEO James Wilson had always been arrogant and dismissive toward vendors, but the recording of Derek's confession wiped the smirk off his face instantly. Mr. Wilson, your electronics shipments are being transported by vehicles operating with falsified safety certifications. If one of those trucks causes an accident due to mechanical failure, Desert Electronics could face wrongful death lawsuits worth millions. His legal counsel, Sandra Martinez, immediately understood the catastrophic liability implications. Electronics companies are already targets for product liability claims. Adding transportation negligence to our risk profile could bankrupt us if something goes wrong. James's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. How long has Megaflow been operating with fake safety records? Based on the federal investigation, at least 18 months. Every shipment you've entrusted to Derek's company has been a potential legal time bomb. The Desert Electronics contract cancellation was processed within hours, along with a formal complaint filed with the Department of Transportation requesting immediate investigation of their shipping safety concerns. By Friday afternoon, Derek had lost 3 major clients, representing over $2 million in annual revenue. But the week's biggest revelation came from an unexpected source, Madison Torres, my former colleague at Megaflow and Derek's current logistics coordinator. Madison called me Friday evening, her voice shaking with fear and anger. "Fern, I need to tell you something about Derek that you need to know. Can we meet somewhere private?" We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop in Tempe, away from anyone who might recognize us. Madison arrived looking exhausted and nervous, constantly glancing around as if expecting Derek to appear. Derek has been selling confidential client shipping data to overseas competitors, she revealed, sliding a folder across the table. He's been providing detailed information about delivery routes, cargo manifests, and security protocols to companies in China and Mexico. The documents Madison brought were photocopies of emails between Derek and representatives from foreign logistics companies. The sales price for confidential client information ranged from $5,000 to $20,000 per data package, depending on the client's shipping volume and cargo value. This isn't just embezzlement anymore, Fern. Derek is committing federal trade violations and potentially treason by selling sensitive commercial information to foreign competitors. Madison's hands trembled as she showed me the most damning evidence. Last month, Derek sold Phoenix Medical Supply's complete shipping manifest to a company in Shanghai. They used that information to intercept and copy shipments, then flooded the market with counterfeit medical devices. The scope of Derek's crimes kept expanding beyond anything I'd imagined. He wasn't just stealing money. He was betraying American companies and endangering public safety through counterfeit medical equipment. "Why are you telling me this, Madison?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because Derek fired 2 other employees this year who questioned his practices. Angela Reyes discovered the fake safety inspections and got terminated for insubordination. Tommy Chen found evidence of the vendor fraud and was fired for performance issues. Derek has been systematically eliminating anyone who gets too close to his crimes." Madison pulled out one final document that made my blood run cold. Derek has been bribing DOT safety inspectors with cash payments ranging from $2,000 to $10,000. He's got 3 federal employees on his payroll, including the inspector responsible for Megaflow's compliance certifications. The evidence Madison provided transformed my strategic campaign into something much larger. Derek wasn't just embezzling from one company, he was running a criminal enterprise that threatened national security and public safety. As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed with a text message that filled me with grim satisfaction. Fern, this is Robert Sterling from Phoenix Medical Supply. Thank you for saving our company from a disaster we never saw coming. Word is spreading about Megaflow's problems, and other companies are starting to ask questions. Derek's empire was crumbling faster than I dared to hope, but the weekend would bring new revelations that would accelerate his downfall beyond anything I could have planned. Monday morning brought the first signs that Derek had discovered my role in his client's mass exodus. My phone rang at 7:15 with a number I didn't recognize, but Derek's venomous voice was unmistakable. You think you're clever, don't you, Fern? Stealing my clients with your lies and fabricated evidence? This is far from over. The call ended before I could respond, but Derek's declaration of war was clear. Within hours, his counterattack began with a viciousness that shocked even me. My first indication of his strategy came from an unexpected source, Dr. Amanda Foster. My dentist called to inform me that someone claiming to be from Megaflow's legal department had contacted her office asking about my mental health history and medication usage. Fern, I've never experienced anything like this. The caller claimed you were involved in corporate espionage and that they needed medical records to support criminal charges. Of course, I refused and told them to contact you directly, but I wanted you to know. Derek was conducting a systematic invasion of my privacy, searching for any ammunition he could use to discredit me. Over the next 2 days, similar calls reached my bank, my apartment complex management office, my car insurance company, and even my hair salon. Each caller claimed to be investigating criminal activity and requested personal information that could be used against me. The harassment escalated Tuesday, when Patricia Wells filed a formal police report accusing me of stealing proprietary software and confidential client databases. Phoenix Police Detective Maria Santos called to inform me that I was under investigation for corporate espionage and data theft. Ms. Coleman, I need you to come in for questioning regarding allegations that you illegally accessed and copied confidential information from Megaflow Logistics. The complaint includes security footage and computer logs that allegedly show unauthorized data transfers. I immediately called Janet Morrison, who connected me with VTS's legal counsel attorney, Sarah Kim. Sarah accompanied me to the police station Wednesday morning for what turned out to be a 3-hour interrogation based entirely on fabricated evidence. Detective Santos showed me computer logs that appeared to show massive data downloads from Megaflow's servers to external devices during my final week of employment. The timestamps and file sizes were damning, but I knew the evidence was manufactured. Detective, these logs are falsified. Derek Hoffman created this fake evidence to cover up his own crimes. I have recordings that prove his embezzlement and the conspiracy to frame me. I played Derek's confession recording for Detective Santos, whose expression shifted from suspicion to confusion as she heard Derek admitting to creating fraudulent evidence against me. Sarah Kim presented additional evidence supporting my claims. The federal DOT investigation documents, witness statements from Madison Torres, and documentation of Derek's bribery schemes. Detective, my client is not a criminal. She's a whistleblower who exposed massive federal crimes. The harassment she's experiencing is retaliation for reporting Derek Hoffman's illegal activities. Detective Santos agreed to investigate Derek's activities rather than pursue charges against me, but warned that additional complaints could complicate the situation. Derek's personal attacks intensified Thursday when he contacted my landlord, George Martinez, with false allegations designed to get me evicted from my apartment. George called to inform me that someone claiming to be a federal agent had told him I was under investigation for terrorist activities and money laundering. Fern, I've known you for 2 years and never had any problems, but this person said you were using your apartment for criminal activities. He claimed the FBI was monitoring your communications and that I could face charges for harboring a criminal. I met with George that evening to explain the truth about Derek's harassment campaign. The recording of Derek's confession convinced him that the federal agent was actually Derek himself, using intimidation tactics to destroy my personal life. This guy is really trying to destroy you, Fern. I'll make sure building security knows not to provide any information about you to anyone claiming to be law enforcement without proper identification. Friday brought Derek's most disgusting attack, yet he contacted my 72-year-old mother, Carol, at her retirement community in Tucson. Mom called me in tears after Derek told her I owed Megaflow $50,000 and was facing federal prison time for corporate crimes. Honey, this man said you stole money from your company and that federal marshals were going to arrest you unless the debt was paid immediately. He wanted me to wire money to cover your legal fees. Derek's attempt to scam my elderly mother crossed every line of decency. I drove to Tucson that evening to comfort Mom and explain the truth about Derek's criminal harassment campaign. Mom, everything that man told you was a lie designed to hurt me and steal money from you. He's the criminal and federal investigators are building a case against him right now. I showed Mom the evidence I'd gathered, Derek's confession, recording the DOT investigation documents, and documentation of his harassment campaign against multiple former employees. This Derek person sounds like a very dangerous man, honey. Have you contacted the police about what he's doing to you? Yes, Mom. The authorities are investigating him for multiple federal crimes. His desperation shows that his criminal empire is collapsing. Saturday brought unexpected validation when Detective Santos called with shocking news. Derek's harassment campaign had inadvertently provided federal investigators with evidence of additional crimes. Ms. Coleman, during Derek Hoffman's call to your mother, he accidentally revealed that he has access to your personal banking information, employment records, and credit reports. Federal agents traced his access logs and discovered he's been using Megaflow's corporate database subscriptions to illegally investigate former employees. Derek's privacy violations were federal crimes carrying significant penalties. His desperate attempts to destroy my reputation were actually accelerating his own criminal prosecution. There's more, Detective Santos continued. We've discovered that Derek has been operating a side business using Megaflow trucks for personal deliveries. He's been charging customers cash for shipping services while using company vehicles and fuel, then pocketing the profits. Derek's criminal activities kept expanding as investigators dug deeper into his operations. Every desperate attack against me revealed new evidence of his corruption and lawlessness. Sunday evening, I received a call from Agent Sarah Chen, the federal investigator leading the DOT case against Megaflow. Derek's escalating harassment had attracted federal attention to his criminal enterprise. Ms. Coleman, Derek Hoffman's activities over the past week have provided us with evidence of obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and computer fraud. His attempts to silence you have actually strengthened our case against him. Agent Chen explained that Derek's harassment campaign violated multiple federal laws and demonstrated consciousness of guilt regarding the original charges. His desperate behavior was typical of criminals who realized their empire was collapsing. We're accelerating our investigation based on the evidence Derek has inadvertently provided. His personal vendetta against you shows the kind of vindictive behavior that suggests deeper criminal involvement. As I prepared for another week of Derek's attacks, I felt confident that his desperate harassment campaign was backfiring spectacularly. Every attempt to destroy my reputation was actually providing federal investigators with new evidence of his criminal enterprise. Derek's mistake was assuming I would crumble under pressure like his previous victims. Instead, his attacks were hardening my resolve and demonstrating to federal authorities that he was exactly the kind of criminal who needed to be stopped before he hurt more innocent people. Monday morning brought news that transformed Derek's personal harassment campaign into a corporate catastrophe. Megaflow's stock price opened down 18% after weekend reports surfaced about federal investigations and major client defections. By 10 o'clock, trading was halted due to excessive volatility. Janet Morrison called to update me on the rapidly deteriorating situation. Fern, 3 more major clients terminated their Megaflow contracts this morning. Word about Derek's safety violations is spreading through industry networks faster than wildfire. The Phoenix Business Journal had published an investigative article titled Local Logistics Company Under Federal Investigation for Safety Fraud. While the article didn't name Megaflow directly, anyone in the industry could identify the company from the details provided. Derek is panicking, Janet continued. Our contacts at other logistics companies report that he's been calling clients personally, trying to convince them that former disgruntled employees are spreading false rumors about Megaflow's operations. Derek's desperation was becoming public knowledge, destroying whatever credibility he had left with remaining clients. His frantic damage control efforts were actually confirming that the allegations against him were true. Tuesday morning delivered the blow that shattered Derek's criminal empire. Federal agents raided Megaflow's headquarters with search warrants for financial records, computer systems, and communications equipment. Local news trucks surrounded the building as FBI and DOT investigators carried boxes of evidence to waiting vehicles. I watched the live coverage from Janet's office, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and amazement at how quickly Derek's world was collapsing. The The news reporter described the investigation as focusing on allegations of financial fraud, safety violations, and illegal business practices. Madison Torres called me during the raid, her voice shaking with excitement and fear. Fern, federal agents are seizing everything: computers, filing cabinets, Derek's personal office safe, even his company cell phone. He's been screaming at investigators and threatening to call his lawyers. The federal raid triggered immediate consequences throughout the industry. Megaflow's remaining clients began terminating contracts within hours, unwilling to be associated with a company under federal criminal investigation. Derek tried to access the computer systems to delete files, Madison reported, but the FBI already had tech specialists on site who prevented him from destroying evidence. They caught him trying to wipe his hard drive and threatened to arrest him for obstruction of justice. Wednesday brought Derek's most desperate and dangerous decision, faced with inevitable prosecution and the complete collapse of his business empire. He decided to flee the country with the money he'd embezzled over 18 months. Agent Sarah Chen called to warn me about Derek's flight plans. Our surveillance indicates that Derek Hoffman has purchased tickets to Mexico City for tomorrow morning. He's been liquidating assets and transferring money to offshore accounts throughout the week. I immediately understood the implications. If Derek escapes to Mexico, he could disappear forever with millions of stolen dollars while his victims never receive restitution. That's exactly why we need your help, Fern. Derek's flight itinerary isn't public information, but he might try to contact you before leaving. Any information about his whereabouts could prevent his escape. Derek's desperation reached its peak that evening when he called me directly, his voice slurred with alcohol and raw with desperation. Fern, you've destroyed everything I built. I hope you're satisfied watching innocent people lose their jobs because of your lies. I kept him talking while recording the conversation, hoping to gather intelligence about his escape plans. Derek, the only person who destroyed Megaflow was you. Your crimes are finally catching up with you. Crimes, he laughed bitterly. Everyone in this industry cuts corners to stay competitive. I just did what was necessary to keep the company profitable and people employed. His self-justification revealed the mindset of someone who truly believed his criminal behavior was acceptable. Those safety inspections are just bureaucratic paperwork anyway. My drivers are experienced professionals who don't need government babysitters monitoring their every move. Derek's admission of deliberately falsifying safety records provided additional evidence for federal prosecutors, but his next statement revealed information I immediately shared with Agent Chen. By tomorrow night, I'll be somewhere your federal friends can't touch me. Mexico doesn't extradite for business disagreements, and I've got enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I ended the call and immediately contacted Agent Chen with Derek's location and departure timeline. Federal authorities positioned surveillance teams at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport to intercept him before his morning flight. Thursday morning's dramatic conclusion exceeded everyone's expectations. Derek's panic over potential arrest led him to make the most catastrophic decision of his criminal career. He attempted to destroy evidence by setting fire to Megaflow's main warehouse. The call came from Madison at 8:37 in the morning. Fern, Derek has lost his mind completely. He's at the warehouse with gasoline and matches, threatening to burn everything to prevent federal agents from finding more evidence. I contacted Agent Chen immediately, but Derek's desperation had progressed beyond rational thought. Security cameras captured him dousing filing cabinets and computer equipment with gasoline while screaming about destroying evidence of his business practices. The fire Derek started in the administrative section of the warehouse spread faster than he anticipated, reaching a storage area where he'd been illegally storing hazardous chemicals to avoid proper disposal costs. The resulting explosion could be heard throughout downtown Phoenix, sending a mushroom cloud of toxic smoke into the morning sky. Live news coverage showed firefighters battling the blaze while evacuating surrounding buildings. The explosion had injured 4 emergency responders and created an environmental disaster that would require months of cleanup. Derek's final act of desperation had transformed his white-collar crimes into attempted arson assault on federal officers and environmental terrorism. His attempt to hide evidence had created a public spectacle that guaranteed maximum media attention and criminal penalties. Local news anchors described the scene as a massive industrial explosion that has injured first responders and created a toxic environmental emergency in downtown Phoenix. Federal investigators confirmed that the fire was deliberately set by a company executive attempting to destroy evidence. Derek was arrested at the scene covered in soot and suffering from smoke inhalation, still clutching an empty gasoline container. His escape to Mexico had been replaced by a guaranteed trip to federal prison for crimes that now included attempted murder of emergency personnel. The warehouse explosion became the lead story on every Phoenix news channel, cementing Megaflow's reputation as a criminal enterprise that endangered public safety. The environmental cleanup costs alone would bankrupt any remaining corporate assets. As I watched the news coverage of Derek's spectacular downfall, I realized that his desperation had accomplished something my careful planning never could have achieved: complete public exposure of his criminal behavior and absolute destruction of any sympathy he might have received from prosecutors or the public. Derek's attempt to escape justice had instead guaranteed that he would face the maximum possible penalties while becoming the poster child for corporate crime and environmental terrorism in Arizona. The federal courthouse in downtown Phoenix became the stage for Derek Hoffman's complete legal destruction over the following month. His desperate warehouse arson had transformed a white-collar fraud case into a terrorism prosecution, carrying decades of potential prison time. Federal prosecutors filed a 17-count indictment that read like a catalog of corporate crime: embezzlement, mail fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, environmental terrorism, assault on federal officers, computer fraud, bribery of federal inspectors, and violation of hazardous materials regulations. Derek's attorney, an expensive defense lawyer named Richard Blackwell, immediately began plea negotiations after reviewing the overwhelming evidence against his client. The prosecution's case included Derek's recorded confessions, testimony from multiple witnesses, financial records seized during the federal raid, and video evidence of the warehouse arson. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh presented the government's case with methodical precision. Mr. Hoffman operated a criminal enterprise disguised as a legitimate business. His crimes endangered public safety, defrauded clients and taxpayers, and culminated in an act of environmental terrorism that injured 4 emergency responders. The plea negotiations revealed the full scope of Derek's criminal profits. Over 18 months, he had embezzled $4.2 million through fake vendor contracts, bribery schemes, and theft of company resources. Additional profits from selling confidential client data to foreign competitors totaled another $800,000. Patricia Wells, facing her own federal charges for conspiracy and obstruction of justice, agreed to testify against Derek in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her cooperation provided prosecutors with detailed evidence of the conspiracy to frame me and the systematic destruction of evidence. Patricia's testimony confirms that Derek Hoffman orchestrated a deliberate campaign to silence whistleblowers and obstruct federal investigations, Prosecutor Walsh explained during a court hearing. His actions demonstrate consciousness of guilt and a pattern of criminal behavior spanning multiple years. The financial restitution calculations were staggering. Derek owed $4.2 million in direct embezzlement plus interest and penalties. The environmental cleanup costs from his warehouse fire totaled another $3.8 million. Victim compensation for injured firefighters and poisoned groundwater added $2 million more. Derek's total financial liability exceeded $10 million, far more than his assets could cover. His house vehicles, boats, and investment accounts would all be seized to provide partial restitution to victims. The sentencing hearing attracted significant media attention as representatives from Derek's victims addressed the court. Robert Sterling from Phoenix Medical Supply described how Derek's safety violations could have resulted in contaminated medical equipment reaching hospitals and surgical centers. Your Honor, Derek Hoffman's crimes went beyond stealing money. His falsified safety inspections and regulatory violations put patients' lives at risk. Every medical device shipped by his company was potentially contaminated or damaged due to his negligent transportation practices. James Wilson from Desert Electronics explained how Derek's sale of confidential shipping data to foreign competitors had resulted in counterfeit products flooding the American market. Chinese companies used Derek's inside information to intercept and copy our shipments, then sold dangerous counterfeit electronics that could cause fires or electrical injuries. The most emotional testimony came from Captain Luis Rodriguez of the Phoenix Fire Department, who had been injured in the warehouse explosion. Your Honor, Derek Hoffman's decision to destroy evidence through arson showed complete disregard for the safety of first responders. 4 of my colleagues required hospitalization for chemical burns and smoke inhalation, because this defendant valued his freedom more than our lives. Judge Margaret Harrison presided over the sentencing with obvious disgust for Derek's crimes and their impact on the community. Mr. Hoffman, your actions represent a betrayal of every principle that legitimate business depends upon. You stole from your clients, endangered public safety, corrupted federal inspections, and attempted to murder emergency responders rather than accept responsibility for your crimes. Derek's final statement to the court was a masterpiece of self-pity and blame-shifting that convinced no one of his remorse. Your Honor, I made some mistakes in trying to keep my company competitive, but I never intended for anyone to get hurt. The business environment in logistics is extremely challenging, and sometimes corners get cut to meet client demands. Judge Harrison's response was swift and harsh. Mr. Hoffman, you have shown no genuine remorse for your crimes or their victims. Your attempts to minimize your actions as cutting corners demonstrate that you still don't understand the magnitude of harm you've caused. The sentence was everything federal prosecutors had requested: 8 years in federal prison for the fraud and embezzlement charges, plus an additional 5 years for the arson and assault charges to be served consecutively. Derek would spend 13 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Patricia Wells received 2 years in federal prison for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Her cooperation with prosecutors earned her a reduced sentence, but she still faced significant prison time for her role in the criminal conspiracy. The financial penalties were equally devastating. Derek was ordered to pay $4.2 million in restitution to Megaflow's insurance companies and defrauded clients. Additional fines and penalties totaled another $2 million. Megaflow Logistics officially declared bankruptcy the day after Derek's sentencing, unable to survive the loss of clients' federal fines and environmental cleanup costs. The company's remaining assets were sold at auction to satisfy victim compensation claims and environmental remediation requirements. Velocity Transport Solutions acquired Megaflow's former clients' shipping contracts and warehouse facilities for $800,000, a fraction of their actual value. Janet Morrison's strategic patience during the investigation had positioned VTS to absorb Megaflow's entire market share at bargain prices. Fern Derek's crimes have inadvertently made VTS the largest logistics company in Arizona, Janet explained during our post-sentencing meeting. We've gained $15 million in annual contracts while spending less than $1 million to acquire the assets. The federal investigation's ripple effects extended far beyond Derek's personal prosecution. Agent Sarah Chen's task force had uncovered similar corruption schemes at 12 other logistics companies across Arizona and Nevada, leading to a comprehensive industry-wide investigation. Your evidence and testimony provided the foundation for the largest transportation crime investigation in southwestern United States history. Agent Chen told me during a follow-up meeting, "We've identified over 40 companies operating with falsified safety records and corrupt inspection practices. The Department of Transportation offered me a position as a federal consultant for transportation crime prevention, recognizing my expertise in identifying regulatory violations and corporate fraud schemes. The role would involve training federal inspectors and developing new protocols for detecting falsified compliance records." Ms. Coleman, your background in logistics operations combined with your experience exposing corporate corruption makes you uniquely qualified to help prevent future Derek Hoffmans from endangering public safety. I was honored by the federal offer but decided to remain with Velocity Transport Solutions, where I could build something positive rather than spending my career fighting corruption. Janet Morrison had promoted me to Regional Operations Vice President with responsibility for VTS operations throughout Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. The promotion came with national recognition from the International Logistics Association, which presented me with their Integrity in Business Award for courageous whistleblowing that protected public safety and industry reputation. My story became a case study at business schools across the country, demonstrating how one person's willingness to challenge corruption could transform an entire industry. Speaking invitations poured in from trade associations, business schools, and government agencies interested in preventing similar crimes. But the most satisfying recognition came from an unexpected source. The 4 firefighters injured in Derek's warehouse explosion sent me a letter thanking me for exposing the safety violations that led to his prosecution. Ms. Coleman, Your courage in reporting Derek Hoffman's crimes probably saved lives by preventing future accidents caused by his falsified safety inspections. The injuries we suffered were terrible, but they could have been much worse if his criminal activities had continued unchecked. Derek Hoffman's complete legal destruction was more thorough than anything I could have planned or hoped for. His desperate attempts to escape justice had transformed him from a white-collar criminal into a convicted terrorist facing 13 years in federal prison and financial ruin that would last the rest of his life. 3 months after Derek's sentencing, I stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new corner office at Velocity Transport Solutions, watching the sunrise paint the Sonoran Desert in brilliant shades of orange and gold. The view from the 20th floor of our new headquarters building showed the sprawling Phoenix metropolitan area coming to life for another day of honest, safe, and legal commerce. VTS had grown from Arizona's second-largest logistics company to the undisputed regional leader, with operations spanning 5 southwestern states and annual revenues exceeding $60 million. The acquisition of Megaflow's former contracts and facilities had been seamlessly integrated into our operations while maintaining the highest safety and compliance standards in the industry. My role as Regional Operations Vice President carried responsibilities I never could have imagined during those dark, early morning hours when Derek first tried to destroy my career. I now oversee transportation operations for over 300 trucks, 1,200 employees, and partnerships with major corporations throughout the American Southwest. The routing algorithms and safety protocols I developed during my final months at Megaflow had been refined and implemented across VTS's entire network. Our efficiency ratings exceeded industry standards by 30%, while maintaining perfect safety compliance records that made us the preferred carrier for high-value and sensitive cargo. Janet Morrison had entrusted me with developing VTS's corporate culture and employee training programs, ensuring that our rapid growth never compromised our commitment to integrity and transparency. Every new employee received comprehensive training on recognizing and reporting potential compliance violations, with clear protections for whistleblowers and guaranteed support for anyone who raised safety concerns. Fern's principles. As employees had begun calling our ethics guidelines established VTS as the industry leader in corporate accountability. The principles were simple but revolutionary. No employee would ever be punished for questioning safety practices, reporting potential violations, or challenging decisions that could endanger workers or clients. The transformation had attracted attention from business schools and government agencies interested in studying how companies could prevent the kind of corruption that had destroyed Derek's criminal enterprise. Harvard Business School had developed a case study based on our transition from victimization to industry leadership titled From Whistleblower to Executive Building Ethical Organizations Through Courageous Leadership. My speaking schedule had become surprisingly busy as trade associations, corporate boards, and government agencies sought insights into identifying and preventing workplace corruption. The International Association of Transportation Executives had invited me to deliver the keynote address at their annual conference, focusing on creating cultures where difficult conversations lead to positive change. The most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration had implemented new regulations requiring transportation companies to establish whistleblower protection programs similar to what we'd developed at VTS. My experience with Derek's retaliation campaign had helped federal regulators understand how criminals silenced honest employees who threatened their illegal activities. The Fern-Coleman Protocols, as OSHA officially designated the new regulations, required transportation companies to provide clear reporting channels for safety concerns, prohibit retaliation against employees who raised compliance questions, and maintain transparent investigation procedures for all safety-related complaints. The personal satisfaction from these professional achievements was deeply meaningful, but the most emotional validation came from the employees whose lives had been changed by Derek's prosecution and our subsequent industry reforms. Madison Torres had joined VTS as our safety compliance director, finally able to use her expertise in regulatory affairs without fear of retaliation for doing her job properly. Fern, working here feels like what I always thought the logistics industry should be: professional, safe, and honest. Nobody has to choose between doing the right thing and keeping their job. Tommy Chen, the analyst, Derek had fired for questioning vendor fraud, now headed our financial compliance division, and had developed innovative audit procedures that prevented the kind of embezzlement schemes Derek had operated. This company proves that you can be profitable while following the law. Derek's criminal shortcuts were never necessary. He was just too lazy and greedy to operate legally. Angela Reyes, the safety inspector, Derek had terminated for refusing to falsify inspection records, had become our director of fleet safety, and had established maintenance protocols that exceeded federal requirements while reducing operational costs through predictive equipment monitoring. Derek always claimed that proper safety compliance was too expensive and time-consuming, Angela explained during our quarterly safety review. In reality, his corner-cutting cost Megaflow millions in equipment failures, accidents, and ultimately federal prosecution. Doing things right is always cheaper than doing them criminally. The ripple effects of Derek's prosecution continued expanding throughout the southwestern logistics industry. The federal task force that began with our evidence had resulted in criminal charges against 43 individuals at 16 different companies, with total restitution and fines exceeding $200 million. Agent Sarah Chen had been promoted to Regional Director for Transportation Crime Investigations, leading a permanent task force dedicated to preventing the systematic corruption that had infected the industry for decades. Fern, the courage you showed in recording Derek's confession and reporting his crimes probably saved thousands of lives by exposing safety violations throughout the region. The environmental cleanup from Derek's warehouse explosion had been completed at a final cost of $12 million, all paid through asset seizures and insurance claims. The contaminated site had been transformed into a public park dedicated to the firefighters injured during Derek's final act of desperation. Memorial Park featured a bronze statue commemorating the courage of first responders who risk their lives, protecting communities from corporate crime. The dedication ceremony had attracted hundreds of community members who understood that Derek's terrorism could have been much worse without the quick response of emergency personnel. My mother, Carol, had traveled from Tucson for the park dedication, finally able to see the positive outcomes that emerged from Derek's attempts to destroy our family through harassment and fraud. Honey, I'm so proud that you turned something so terrible into something that helps protect other people. Your father would have been amazed to see how strong you became. The personal growth that emerged from confronting Derek's betrayal had taught me that being labeled difficult was often a sign that someone was the only person in the room willing to tell uncomfortable truths. The qualities Derek had tried to suppress, questioning authority, demanding accountability, refusing to accept convenient lies, had become the foundation for building something much better than anything he could have imagined. VTS's success had attracted acquisition offers from national logistics companies seeking to expand their southwestern operations, but Janet and I had decided to remain independent while continuing our regional growth strategy. Our commitment to employee ownership through profit sharing and stock options ensured that the people who built our success would share in its rewards. Fern, we've created something that Derek's criminal mindset could never have achieved, Janet reflected during our weekly leadership meeting. By treating employees, clients, and regulators with respect and honesty, we've built a company that grows stronger every year instead of collapsing under the weight of lies and corruption. The most satisfying aspect of our growth was the employment opportunities we'd created for honest, hardworking people who had been damaged by corrupt employers throughout the industry. VTS had become a refuge for ethical employees who refused to compromise their integrity for short-term profits. Our employee handbook included a statement that had become famous throughout the business community. Velocity Transport Solutions considers questioning authority and challenging unsafe practices to be essential job qualifications. Employees who are labeled difficult by other companies for refusing to violate laws or endanger people will find themselves rewarded and promoted here. The statement attracted applications from whistleblowers, safety advocates, and ethical professionals throughout the transportation industry. Our reputation for protecting honest employees had given VTS access to the best talent in the region, while our competitors struggled with high turnover and compliance problems. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, my assistant brought me a letter that had arrived in the day's mail. The return address showed it was from Federal Correctional Institution, Phoenix, where Derek was serving his 13-year sentence. The letter was brief and typically self-serving. Fern, I hope you understand that none of this was personal. I was just trying to run a successful business in a competitive industry. Maybe we can talk when I get out and figure out how to move forward in a positive way." I read Derek's letter twice, then placed it in my desk drawer without responding. There was nothing to discuss with someone who still couldn't acknowledge the lives he'd endangered and the trust he'd betrayed. Derek's inability to accept responsibility for his crimes proved that his prison sentence was protecting society from someone who would commit the same crimes again if given the opportunity. My phone buzzed with the text message that perfectly captured the contrast between Derek's continuing delusions and the reality we'd built. "Ms. Coleman, this is Captain Rodriguez from Phoenix Fire. My daughter just got accepted to Arizona State University, where she wants to study business ethics. She says your story inspired her to choose a career where she can help prevent corporate crimes like the one that almost killed her dad. Thank you for showing her that doing the right thing makes a difference." The message filled me with the kind of deep satisfaction that no amount of professional success could match. Derek's crimes had created pain and danger for countless people, but the courage to confront his corruption had generated positive changes that would protect future generations from similar betrayals. As I walked through our operations center on my way to the parking garage, I could see the night shift employees preparing for another evening of safe, legal, and professional transportation services. The drivers checking their routes knew that their safety equipment had been properly maintained. The dispatchers coordinating deliveries understood that their communications would never be monitored illegally. The safety inspectors reviewing compliance documentation could trust that every record was accurate and complete. This was what Derek's difficult employee had built: a company where people could do their jobs with pride and integrity, where clients received honest service at fair prices, and where success was measured not just by profits, but by the positive impact on employees and communities. The lesson from Derek's downfall was both simple and profound. True strength comes not from avoiding difficult conversations, but from having the courage to speak truth even when powerful people demand silence. Being labeled difficult often means you're the only person in the room willing to do what's right, regardless of the personal cost. Have you ever been in a situation where speaking up about something wrong felt impossible because of the potential consequences? What would you do if you discovered corruption in your workplace? Your courage to share your experiences could help others find the strength to stand up for what's right. Please leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts on workplace ethics and the importance of protecting whistleblowers. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to help others find this message of hope and empowerment. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people who found extraordinary courage when it mattered most. And please share this story with anyone who might be facing their own difficult choice between staying silent and speaking truth. They need to know they're not alone, and that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, can lead to outcomes more positive than they ever imagined. Thank you for listening to this story of transformation and justice. I hope it reminds you that your voice matters, your integrity has power, and your willingness to be difficult might be exactly what the world needs. Until next time, keep standing up for what's right. The people around you are counting on your courage more than you know.